Welcome, Angela Ahrendts, an incredibly inspirational person, someone who combines an extraordinary humanity with just uncommon talents, and you've put them to work as a leader in so many contexts at different organizations, always through the heart and entering the hearts of so many others. And it's just going to be a special time together to hear from you, Angela. It's also a distinct honor that you are a member of the Howe Institute for Society Board of Directors, and it's just a pleasure to welcome you today in a very unfamiliar, turbulent time to talk about leadership. So welcome, Angela.
Thank you. Thank you. Honored to be here.
And I should say that those who know you or are going to be compelled to look you up will discover that in 2014, you were honored as a Dane Commander of the British Empire. Incredible. You led at Donna Karan, you were then at Burberry, in charge of worldwide retail at Apple. And we're going to talk about your most recent announcement that you've joined to be chairman of Save the Children at a time where so many children need to be saved, because these are really unprecedented times where we're all being challenged, but especially the next generation. Where am I finding you? What's your state of mind right around now?
Well, I think I'm probably the most hopeful now, and I think I've been able to really pivot towards the future. I think we can all see the light at the end of the tunnel of this thing, and I think that we need to aggressively start looking forward, and not just for ourselves. I think for our neighbors, for our communities, and we all need to just unite and move as fast as we can to make up for this year that we've lost.
That's an incredibly hopeful message, but you're always going to find a source of hope and meaning in the challenge. And I think in many words what you're saying, these are challenging times, but finding meaning and hope in the struggle is a great source of resilience. Can I push you to be more specific? You've said that it's really been an opportunity to re-examine, to redesign something about your life or how you're going to emerge to contribute in new or more powerful ways. What did you mean by this idea of to re-examine and redesign how you might contribute?
Yeah, it, and I think probably different than most people, I was already pivoting towards the next chapter. I had already, by the time the pandemic hit, I'd already been away from Apple for 6 months. So I was already in the pause, looking forward to what my next was. So I'm incredibly blessed to honestly, have an extra year, if you will, to really just read and meditate and talk to brilliant people all over the world and see where I could best use my gifts and my expertise to make an impact. Regardless of if I know anything about it or not, which seems to be the story of my life. But and so I was already at a different phase, and I feel so wonderful that I was, and because I think that it allowed me to have even greater perspective, Dov. I think it. I don't know if I would be pivoting to Save the Children had I not had the year of reflection. And this next phase of my life, and I guess I could say I've kind of done this in every phase of my life, I see work as a calling. I've never seen it as a job. I don't like a job. I like it when it is so fulfilling and such a natural extension of who I am. I mean, no different than a great musician or no different than an athlete when it becomes, and in business, that's always, in leadership, that's what I've been. I've never dreaded waking up in the morning and doing what I do because it fulfills me. And so I just needed to find out what my calling was next in life, and again, I think that at every stage of our life, I don't see things as a challenge. I see them as learning, forced learning, and it's a test. And when you pass that test, then in life you're given more, and you're being pushed even further. And so many people don't see it as just lessons.
You speak about a new calling. I, as somebody who knows you as fortunately as I do, this is just a new embodiment and manifestation of your same calling. There's been a through line that defines, I think, your entire career, if there is a word that, or an expression that sums up your calling, it's human energy. That was your TED Talk on human energy.
I believe we need positive energy to be channeled, to help counterbalance all of the negative, disruptive energy out there right now. I think we need it to remove a lot of the individual barriers and individual idiosyncrasies. We need it to unite groups of people to focus on what's best for the greater good of the whole. When you do this, it creates confidence, creates a safe environment where people feel they belong, they're worthy, and I would argue they feel love.
What makes for meaningful connections? I want to spend some time on what it means to be human and what it means to connect meaningfully. How do we forge meaningful connections at work in ways that spill over into our lives? But Angela, I hope you embrace that if I net you out, you're about human connection and all the good that comes from it.
I don't disagree with you. And I guess, like you said, I've never summed myself up that way, but it is, I think, one of the greatest gifts that every one of us as humans are given. And otherwise, we wouldn't be able to communicate, not just verbally, but with our eyes and our expressions. And, you know, and I don't care if that's physically or virtually. Our job as leaders is to look ahead, use our instincts, feel what's coming, and then to unite our teams of people and warn them and pivot and strategize. But what underpins all of that, Dov, in my humble opinion, is trust, values. You know, you sum that up brilliantly. You call it moral leadership. And all that moral leadership to me is it's building a foundation of trust. And trust, the word isn't used enough. We don't talk enough about it. But as humans, if we trust each other, you know, and I don't care if we speak the same language, if I feel you and I trust you, you know, science, it opens up our prefrontal cortex. We naturally begin to connect on a totally different level. And then we start thinking more creatively. We start innovating. We start working closer and closer. And then, you know, the old adage, two heads are better than one. Right. And again, I don't care if it's in a marriage, Dov. I don't care if it's a father-son, you know, in business. So deep values help build deep trust. Deep trust unlocks and unlocks individuals, empowers individuals, but unites groups of people, ordinary people, to collectively do extraordinary things.
What are some of the behaviors and ways a leader can live his or her values so as to engender this kind of trust that enables the kind of collaboration that you speak to?
You know, Dov, I don't want to oversimplify it, but throughout my life, I've always tried to put myself in the other person's position. And how would I want to be treated? How would I want to be spoken to? What do I want to feel? You know, I want to feel like I belong to something. You know, in business, nobody talks about love. You know, it's the greatest connector in the world. I want to feel loved. Right. I don't care if it's by my partner, from my kids, in work. And again, you know, I talked about love at Burberry because I was running it and I could, but it is such an incredible, so again, you build this trust, you unite, and then it's okay to talk about all of these very basic, fundamental human things. You know, I don't think that do unto others is called the golden rule for no reason. You know, and so I believe heavily in servant leadership. Put yourself in the other person's position. I've always said my job is just to be the connector, the enabler, which empowers individuals to do great things. It's never about me, ever.
Let me push a bit. I mean, there's nothing like love. But we came of age where we said you want love, that's in your relationships, in your family, with your loved ones, Your dog loves you unconditionally, but we're talking about business. And we came of age in business where we didn't hear the word love, or we didn't hear the word hope. People say hope is not a strategy. I want a plan. I want a budget. Show me how you're going to get from A to B. We crowded out hope, and nothing animates us more than hope and love, yet it's been crowded out. Let's be explicit. You're saying that in the context of business, at a company, a centralizing, central animating ethos should and can be love.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because again, let's throw a little bit of data behind it, right? The rates of loneliness in the US have doubled in the last 40 years. 1 in 4 people in the US today feel lonely and isolated. And I shouldn't say today, that was before COVID. 1 in 4. And the worst part is the under 30 are feeling even more lonely and more isolated. And that's why, Dov, you and I started working together at Apple. You know, we knew that this trend was happening in society. But let's take it a step further. Let's look at it into business. 70% of the younger generation do not feel engaged in their work, and 50% of them will leave if they don't feel that their manager is ethically, morally leading them towards something bigger. I mean, those are massive numbers. So this is business, and it is one of the blessings, I think, coming out of COVID. It is going to force managers and force leaders, and I don't care for the word manager, I much prefer leaders, but it's going to force them to be more compassionate, more empathetic, more caring and selfless. And I mean, to potentially lose half of your young employee base because you're not an authentic, ethical, moral leader. I mean, that's massive money, Dov, to hire and recruit and train, et cetera.
We've talked about that we've gone from an industrial age where we hired hands to a knowledge economy where we hired heads, and the smartest heads and the greatest experts, to a more human economy where we're hiring hearts, and we're, through empathy and servant leadership, we're really capturing the hearts of all stakeholders, but especially employees, so that they can come together and do great things. And it seems like the pandemic has not forced this new reality, but rather accelerated it. It's game over. We are in this new world and we're never going back. Fair enough to put it that way to you, Angela?
Absolutely. And absolutely, Dov. And not only to throw a bigger challenge on it, game over physically. Right. Now, on top of it, we've got to figure out, you and I had a natural connection when we met. When you stood on stage at the Steve Jobs Theater talking to thousands of retail employees about moral leadership, et cetera, you were physically present with them. Now you're not.
Right.
So how do leaders we know a lot didn't have it, but those that did have it have a bigger challenge now. I keep looking you in the eyes on my phone because I want to feel you and I want you to feel me. But it is a much bigger challenge, right, to continue, everything we believe in our authentic, emotive leadership virtually. And Angela, and build that trust that we're talking about.
Well, you had a deep intuition that whatever the challenge was before has only profoundly increased, and you urged and catalyzed the Howe Institute to study this. And your former colleague from Apple and mentee, Christy Sclater, she came to the Howe Institute, catalyzed and inspired by you to ask us to work together on a piece of research where we would study the state of human connection. How meaningful, deep, and healthy is it in this COVID world? And we also studied the influence of a certain kind of leadership, moral leadership, on human connection in a pandemic. We surveyed 1,000 professionals in companies around the United States, and we asked people to rate their managers, and then we created a scale based on the moral leadership behaviors that we teach. And we've talked at length about the findings. I'll summarize a few. moral leaders, in fact, do foster more meaningful connections. And when they do, the people who work for them are 4 times as likely to feel more connected and more loyal henceforth than they were since the start of the pandemic. That in many ways, the pandemic was an opportunity for the right leaders to deepen and make connection more meaningful. So question to you, what do you think of these findings? Anything surprise you? But thank you for urging us to do this piece of research. And we're going to keep looking at the state of meaningful connection at work.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think the learnings, Dov, are powerful. There were a couple of things that surprised me, which were interesting, that there were a couple of gender disparities, that women specifically long for that moral leadership. And when you have those moral leaders, that upper quartile of leadership, then everything's equal. But women turn off much faster when they don't have those moral leaders than typically men do. And I thought it was also interesting that how the impact on the younger generation, because you would think that they naturally, they're digital natives, the under 30s, but interesting, the technology exists, the leaders are there, but maybe leaders aren't pivoting and leveraging that technology to really, empower the under 30s. I think the other thing that I found fascinating was that flexibility in scheduling was the #1 thing called out, again, by the young. And the way I interpreted that was, they take the flexibility as you trusting them. And I think it's important for every company, not just to live on Zoom, to have meetings and things. This is the new way of working. How are you going to keep your employees engaged and motivated? And how are you as a leader going to authentically, connect, et cetera? I mean, they're big changes, but they're not insurmountable. And I just think we have to address them head on. And again, we're not ever going back to the way it was. This is one of the greatest shifts that we'll all look back and read on in years to come.
Just circling back, I'm really compelled by what you said. Do you have an intuition on why there was a gender gap or gender differences around meaningfulness and the kind of leadership that they're experiencing, and what we can learn from that?
I think it'd be worth pursuing a little bit deeper, the gender as well as the youth, et cetera. The only thing I could think of, Dov, is typically, whether it's children, I think it would be interesting to see, rather than just gender, was family involved? Were there other, because, a lot of times, the women tend to multitask in a household a little bit more than men. And I don't want to say that disrespectfully or anything else. And maybe it is less so with millennials. I don't know, but so therefore maybe, and I think women also by nature are more social animals. And that's, there've been enough studies on that as well. Women need to communicate. So maybe their expectations of their leaders are also slightly higher.
And maybe for the first time, there's an opportunity to take 2 aspects that matter to us profoundly: the need to work with dignity and provide and create prosperity and economic stability for our families, and at the same time, from a human perspective, to just care for our friends and loved ones. And if they are treated equally by organizations, we could all flourish more. I'm just speculating or hypothesizing.
Yeah, I think so. And I also think that, it's historic, this 9-to-5 world. And that was, you commuted, you went to the office, you came home. And I think that paradigm has been totally, and so I also think that, and specifically the younger generation, right, who's wanted to be mobile forever. I mean, I love what Peter Drucker in 1993 predicted that traditional work hours, traditional offices were over. I mean, it was nearly 30 years ago. And still pre-pandemic, only half of the companies were even allowing mobile workers. So I don't think anybody was ready, anybody was prepared for it. But it's interesting because when you have trust, then people feel empowered. When they're empowered, they'll do their best work. But if you're still forcing this old 9-to-5 way of working, I mean, and people are sitting all day in front of that's not inspiring. That's not empowering. You will not get their greatest work. And, you know, it's funny, in business, I always used to say, the bigger the business, the simpler and more focused the messages need to be if you really wanted to scale them. I think the same can be true, saying, going from a physical form of leadership to a virtual. You can't overly micromanage in a virtual. You can't expect people to sit there. You know, it's not human. It's not how you, but maybe there's also a way for leaders to focus and to rise up and to simplify. And then if you have that trust built, then just empower, right? Enable, empower teams to do their greatest work. When they do their greatest work, every human isn't on the same time schedule, et cetera. So how do leaders do that? And I think I think there's a moral leadership piece. Absolutely. That's how you build the trust. But I also think that virtual leaders are going to have to, that you've got to pivot, and you cannot do things the same way you did it in a traditional office environment. It won't work.
And the challenge with all this flexibility, people can take this flexibility and go in a myriad of different directions, and they don't all align. So this type of flexibility has to be created in a context where people know this is what we're getting out of bed to do here. This is what good looks like. So in a virtual world, what are your thoughts on how a leader can shape that shared consciousness and context so that people can take advantage of the flexibility to really add value, you know, in extraordinary ways?
It's the multi-billion-dollar question of the day, Dov.
Well, you've answered
No,
it
but
in your prior roles. You've answered that question.
Well, again, you know, and it's why you did the study, Dov. It's called, I mean, it's simple. It's human connection, right? Regardless if it's physically or digitally but it again, collectively, we will do extraordinary things.
Angela Ahrendts is an incredible moral leader who has for many years and continues today to passionately work to inspire and elevate people every day. In part 2 of my How conversation with Angela Ahrendts, we discuss Apple's Human Responsibility Report and why Angela believes that moral leadership is the key to building strong, connected, and healthy societies.